Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here to share some stories from really halfway around the world. Hopefully, I'll bring some interesting perspectives on really some management things I learned from working in the East and working with this guy, Jack Ma, who founded Alibaba. And I think it's a very fitting time to tell the story because if you've been reading the headlines, Jack just announced that a year from now, he's going to take a step back and create barriers from his work. He's going to resign from his role at Alibaba and pursue his own personal passions. So it's a great time to kind of reflect on his tenure at Alibaba and what he created. So I don't know how much all of you know about Alibaba, but I'll tell you one of the first questions I always get is, what was it like as a foreigner to work in a Chinese internet company? And what I tell people is, it's really just like working in any company, anywhere. And as proof, I have here a video of a company meeting I attended, which shows you that really Alibaba, it's universal, and our company meetings were just like those in Denmark and the rest of Europe. So if we can go ahead and watch this brief clip, that would be great.
It was an amazing feeling to look around Yellow Dragon Stadium and see that our team had grown to fill 16,000 seats. It was hard to believe that this was the same Chinese internet company I joined 10 years earlier, just as it moved out of a small apartment. And leading us through our improbable journey was this former English teacher, Jack Ma. In 1999, he and 17 friends had started Alibaba.com in his apartment. I greeted Jack as he walked in. I had worked as a vice president in his company for nearly 10 years, as our team survived the internet bubble, fought a war with eBay, and managed to build China's first global internet company. I settled into my seat and wondered, how would Jack address us on this important night? And then, just like any other billionaire in the same situation, Jack took the stage.
Okay, so just like I said, just like your companies, I'm sure. I don't know if you're applauding me or his singing, but I'll take it. But anyways, if there's anything I hope you take from my talk today is that there are a million ways to be a CEO or a big boss of a huge company, and he has his own way. And by being himself and being authentic, even if some people might think it's a little eccentric, it works for him. And so let me talk a little bit about Jack Ma as a child, because it explains a little bit about the Jack Ma who today runs a company worth over $400 billion and is usually ranked about the 10th largest company in the world. So Jack Ma grew up in Hangzhou, China, and he was born during the Cultural Revolution when China was very much closed off to the world. But for whatever reason, he seemed to want an escape. So he used to kind of escape from his childhood there by reading martial arts books, but also he would escape by going to the West Lake in Hangzhou and meeting and befriending foreigners who would come to Hangzhou to see the city as tourists. So he made it a habit to every day go and meet foreigners, practice English with them, and learn about their cultures. This turned into a career for him because later he went on to become an English teacher. And he worked for 5 years as an English teacher, and then he realized everything he was teaching people was from books and not from real-life experience. So he decided the best way to get real-life experience was to start a business. So he had a couple businesses, and then finally in 1999, he started Alibaba with a vision of creating a global e-commerce business. And at that time, I was living in Beijing, and this slide you see here, that's kind of what China looked like almost anywhere outside of the big cities. The infrastructure wasn't great. It's not a place you could imagine e-commerce really taking off. At that time, less than 10 million people were using the internet. People thought the government would try to control the internet too much. No one had credit cards. There wasn't a consumer culture. So the challenges seemed daunting when Jack started Alibaba. So it was against this backdrop that Jack, in 1999, he drew together his friends in his apartment to give them a speech on the first day he started Alibaba. And they were crazy enough to think they would be successful, so they decided to make a videotape of that. So now I'm going to give you a brief 2-minute clip of some highlights from the speech that Jack Ma gave on those first days against this backdrop of a China where nobody thought e-commerce could take off.
5年的时候，我记得我做出的决定，我自己跟自己讲，我可能改变了自己一辈子所从事的事业。而今天，我想把大家请过来，跟大家共同探讨以后至少5年、10年我们要做的事情。那么阿里巴巴我们将做成怎么样？我想，从黄页的时候我就提过，黄页所要瞄准的对象不是国内战略，而是国际战略。我们所有的竞争对手不在于中国，而在于美国的硅谷。如果说第一，我们把阿里巴巴定位，就把它作为国际站点，我们不要把它定位是国内站点。第二个呢，我想就是我们要学会硅谷人的一种拼劲。如果说我们是早上8点钟下班，8点钟上班，5点钟下班，这个不是搞高科技。这个绝对不是我们阿里巴巴能成功。如果说我们有这种精神，反正我上班了，8点钟上班，5点钟下班了 ，OK， 赶紧去其他地方。人家美国人强就强他的硬件，强就强他的系统建设，这方面确实比你早。但是玩信息玩软的，中国人的脑袋绝不比人家差。我们在座的所有的人的脑袋绝不比任何人差。这就是我们敢跟美国人斗的一些东西，我们绝对敢斗。如果我们是好的 team。好的团队，我们自己知道我们想做什么，我们想干些什么的时候，我相信我们是可以以一当十。我们能够赢政府机构，我们能够赢其他很多的民营企业、大的这种企业的是什么？凭的是我们的精神、我们的意识、我们的创新概念，以及我们这种拼劲才能去斗。否则的话，跟他们有什么区别呢？谁都知道 ，Internet 是个泡沫。我刚才讲的危机感就是 Internet 这个泡沫现在越来，什么时候破？然后呢，把股票掉了，eBay 股票会涨。那么有一天 eBay 股票涨了以后，可能阿里巴巴社区的股票涨，所以不要担心。我觉得 Internet 这个梦不会破，这个泡沫不会破。我们为后面的3、5年所付出的代价是非常惨重。只有这样的惨重的代价，才会赢得我们未来的取得的成功。那么目标是2002年，阿里巴巴上市。
Okay. So those were the goals they came up with in 1999. And you can imagine it's as if someone here in Copenhagen in a small apartment said, you know what, I'm going to build a company bigger than Facebook. Don't worry, Google, we're going to be bigger than Google. I don't even think his co-founders exactly knew what he was talking about if you look at the video. But the point is he had this giant dream. And if you fast forward to today and look at Alibaba where it is now, you know, the one thing that didn't come true in that video was that they didn't have an IPO in 2002, but they did have one in 2014 that was the largest IPO in history. The company raised $25 billion. And if you want to understand the scale and the power of what Alibaba created, we hear more about Amazon over here, but if you want to understand what Alibaba created and how it transformed a whole economy, all you have to do is look at Singles Day. So Singles Day is a shopping day that Alibaba invented, and here are a few scenes from it here. And last year on Singles Day, November 11th, the company did $25 billion of sales in 24 hours on their websites, and that's more than the US total sales on Black Friday and Cyber Monday combined. And very interestingly, 90% was done on mobile devices. So Alibaba has taken that, you know, poor infrastructure I showed you in that picture and completely revolutionized not just e-commerce, but commerce in China, to the point that there's a shopping mall in every pocket. And just one example of just how quick things have changed in China, if you look at payment, so here are people buying some little pancakes on the street with a mobile payment. So mobile payment, China is helping China become really the world's first cashless society. Even it's true, like if you're walking on the street in China now, people might come asking for money and they accept mobile payments. Now, I went to this coffee shop a couple years ago thinking, oh, I can't wait to try this boutique coffee. Looks really good. I got close, and it said, sorry, no cash acceptable. They didn't accept cash, didn't accept credit cards, only mobile payments. So imagine if someone asked you to invest in a coffee chain that they're creating here in Europe and said, yeah, our number one principle, we're not accepting cash, not accepting credit cards. I doubt you would invest. But this is where China is now. And even going beyond e-commerce and beyond payments, Alibaba's moving into retail, doing cashierless stores, doing supermarkets where you go in, you choose what you want, and then by the time you get home, it's already waiting for you. And then they're also moving into artificial intelligence with all the data they have, and also just using big data in ways that, for better or for worse, in Europe, you couldn't use it. So I think, on the one hand, you're seeing that the revolution that Jack Ma created has changed China, and it's spreading to other emerging markets. And I do think it's going to be coming more to Europe. And the thing I would say is, if you want to study the past of e-commerce, study the US and Western Europe, to truly understand the future of what's possible, look at China. Because as Jack Ma says, in the West, e-commerce is just the dessert. In China, it's the main course. So that's how he's affected e-commerce. But I think for this audience, something even more interesting will be the leadership lessons I learned. I was sort of a fly on a Chinese wall all those years. I got to see what were the key things that made him successful. So I'm going to share with you a few of the lessons that I learned. So I have in my book 40 lessons, but I'm going to share with you just a few, and they're lessons, business management lessons you wouldn't learn in business school, not the types of things I learned in a US business school, because I want to share with you some ways that Eastern management thought and how Jack Ma has really embraced and incorporated a lot of things into how he runs his business. So first, martial arts. Jack Ma is a huge martial arts fan. And truly, I believe this, through his understanding of martial arts, he was able to help us ward off giant competitors. But let me first show you a video clip of how Jack views himself as a martial artist. Because, yes, he's small, he doesn't look that strong, but he was sort of starred in a short kung fu film that came out last year. So let's just see a minute of that.
哎，差不多了吧？还打不打？我不打女人。
Okay, so once again, your typical CEO. But this is more than just a cute film he starred in. When I was in Alibaba, we were facing a major challenge from eBay, which was coming into China with hundreds of millions of dollars, great technology, and they were coming straight at our business. But oddly enough, Jack Ma, in the face of that, was just as calm as he was in this film. And I'll give you an example of how it worked. Basically, we used our competitors' strength against them. So that's a key martial arts tactic. Now, when I went to business school, we learned the frameworks, we came out, and we all applied these same frameworks. The problem with that is when everyone else you're competing with is doing the same thing, you can easily predict what they're going to do. But our approach with eBay, we saw how much money they're spending on advertising. We saw how much they were going to do to educate the market in China about e-commerce. So we said, let's just piggyback off of that. And we engaged eBay in a very public PR battle, putting pressure all the way in China, talking about how our website was better. The Chinese media got really involved in this, and the more that we wound up this PR machine, the more that we were included in anything that anyone talked about eBay. And we used that same pressure to apply pressure on their Wall Street analysts and journalists covering them in the US to show how we were slowly beating eBay in China. And so we changed the rules of the game, I think in an ethical way, in a legal way, but we did it in a way where Jack said, we know they're stronger than us financially, and with technology, we need to find a creative way to defeat them. So that's one example of sort of martial arts tactics at work. Another lesson I learned from him is a saying that Jack liked to say, which is be as fast as a rabbit, patient as a turtle. So in business today, especially the internet, it's tempting to just move quickly every day. But Jack had a goal of building a company that would last 102 years. So on the one hand, we were focused on execution on a daily level with that kind of urgency, but we also had the patience to know that, look, we're building a 102-year company. Let's not get discouraged by daily setbacks, because this is a long haul to build it. Another one. So in China, a lot of people know that the words for crisis include the characters for danger and opportunity. So here you have danger and opportunity, which are combined to make the word crisis. So one thing that Jack Ma was great at is whenever we faced a crisis, for example, when we faced SARS, I don't know if you remember when the SARS, the disease, was spreading through Asia. Actually, our company was really affected when one of our colleagues came down with SARS. And it turned out that 400 of us in the company headquarters were quarantined and had to work from home. So we ran the company from our computers in our homes. Now, the thing that amazed me at that time was the calmness with which Jack faced it, because that could have destroyed a lot of companies, but it helped us in two ways in the long run. And this is after our colleague luckily ended up in good condition. So first, it drew us together as a team. It was a key turning point where we survived that, and so we had this bond of having gone through that together. But second, we realized in an era where people couldn't meet face-to-face to do business, that actually e-commerce was the way for them to actually grow their business. And so it really accelerated e-commerce in China, especially after we partnered with the government to go around and educate small businesses about how to do e-commerce in the SARS era. So again, whether it's the Brexit or trade wars or whatever's going on, every crisis has an opportunity, and to calmly stare it down and face it is really key. And so really the last thing I'm going to talk about is something which here is going to be very abstract, but I'm going to take a chance and try to describe it. And this is how Jack Ma and the company dealt with change. Because when I was at Alibaba, I was hired along with about 20 other foreigners, and after 1 year, there's just me and another one left. And I think the reason was that China was a dynamic market, internet was changing all the time, and the people coming in from the West had very rigid mindsets of how to plan and do business. But I think Jack was very much influenced by Taoism. And Taoism has a principle which the philosophy says, if you are in water, you're an object in water, are you going to face it like a rock and try to block a wave that's coming after you? Or are you going to let go and just go with the flow, and are you going to surf that wave? So I'm putting it into very Western terms, but the point is this. We weren't wed to a plan. We didn't have a rigid sense of trying to impose our will upon the world. We said we will take every day as it comes, be comfortable with change, comfortable with ambiguity, and if you're comfortable with that, then you will look at things with an optimistic view, knowing that everything in life will change, which is a Taoist principle which worked its way into Jack Ma's management philosophy. So I think the last thing I'll leave you with here is something which is somewhat of a platitude in management, but because I saw it firsthand, I'm just going to say it one more time because this was my biggest takeaway. So when we talk about breaking barriers, I know this is a group that sets goals. Even I know in the handbook, it has a goal for each of the speakers. So for me too, every year I set goals. And what I really finally began to realize was that I set goals and I was happy when I achieved them. But the goals that Jack Ma set were way beyond what most people would set. And so it taught me that it's important not only to achieve your goals, but to ask yourself, are the goals as big as I thought? So to illustrate this point, I'm going to leave you with the speech that Jack Ma gave at the 10-year anniversary of Alibaba, where he was projecting what he wanted the next 10 years to look like. And so this is him setting the goals for the next 10 years, really what's going to be the end of his time at Alibaba. And his style is one thing, but more important is the goals that he sets and how big they are, because most of them have been realized by now. So if we can show this last video.
10年以前，在我的家里，我还有17位的其他的17位的同事，刚才的创业者们，我们描绘了一个图。我们认为中国互联网会怎么发展，中国电子商务会怎么发展。我们讲了2个小时，从此就开始走上了这条路。那么，什么让我们活了下来？什么让我们10年以来坚持的走到现在？这些问题我们一直在思考。今天呢，我想在这儿跟所有的阿里人、阿里的亲朋好友分享一下。我认为我们是一个非常幸运的公司。我们幸运生活在这个时代，我们幸运生活在互联网的时代，我们幸运生活在中国。今天我们刚刚开始，后面的路还非常之长。来到阿里巴巴不是为了份工作，是为了个梦想，是为了份事业。让华尔街所有的投资骂我们吧，我们坚持客户第一，员工第二，股东第三。我们需要有21世纪理念的公司，是一家有开放、更懂得开放、更懂得分享、更懂得责任、更懂得全球化观念的公司。世界需要的是一种精神、一种文化、一种信念、一种梦想。阿里人未来10年坚守我们的信念，坚守我们的文化，坚守我们的梦想。只有梦想、理念、使命、价值体系，才能让我们走得远。今天很残酷，明天更残酷，后天很美好。绝大部分的人死在明天晚上，看不到后天的太阳。阿里人必须看到后天的太阳。世界给了我们这个舞台，全球给了我们这个机会，动用所有的智慧、所有的勇气、一切的努力，去帮助1000万家企业生存、成长和发展，创造1亿就业机会，为10亿人提供真正价廉物美的平台。谢谢大家。
So I remember at the time thinking these are really audacious goals, but so many of them have been accomplished that hopefully this will give you a good example of how in an Eastern setting, one CEO has his own way of doing things, and hopefully there are a few lessons you've enjoyed from this. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Porter Erisman, for giving us these fascinating insights. As you all know, you can ask questions through Pigeonhole, and I want to actually begin with a question from Pigeonhole, if you don't mind. Someone wants to know how you personally, what you did to break through the Chinese cultural barriers to succeed as a team member.
Sure. So, you know, what I learned over time, there's different stages of understanding how to work in a very different culture. And the first stage when you arrive in a place like China or Alibaba, what most people do is they look and they point out all the things that are wrong. They assume that things that are different must be wrong, because most people, I think, are pretty proud and confident in their worldview. And then when they're thrown in a totally different environment, they might think, oh, you know what, this is all bad. So a lot of Westerners that came in would point out all the problems with the company. And I would, even myself, I kind of was humbled over time. So I think what the key thing for me was just to let go of that, to just learn, watch, listen, learn, and view things that just with an open mind. And then over time, I found that, yeah, some things that I thought were maybe done better in the US or in the West, actually there's a beauty of how it's done in China. For example, China is so cohesive as a team. It used to drive me a little crazy. We'd go on a company trip and it's just group, everything is group, group, group. But then I saw what it meant for the company, which was it had the real family feeling. And so I learned over time to keep an open mind and go with the flow and not make a critical judgment of everything I saw.
Fantastic. Let's talk about, well, we have another question here that many people would surely like to know the answer to. What should the leaders sitting in the audience today stop doing to be as fast as the rabbit and patient as the turtle?
You know, it's so funny because when I come to often Europe, if I'm totally honest, the last time I was in Copenhagen 6 months ago, I spoke at a conference about retail. And the theme of the conference was sort of becoming Armageddon of Amazon. But when you give a talk in other places, it's all about the opportunity and the great things that are possible. And so I think that the number one thing people can do is, again, like embrace change and view change as something which is a positive thing. You can't stop it, so it's a positive thing, so to embrace it. Because when people get in a defensive position trying to protect their business from e-commerce, rather than viewing how to bring it into their business in a real way, I think when you're trying to protect your position, you don't build something. So it's better to go out and build something than be disrupted.
I've read somewhere in an interview that you've said that the Chinese are inherently more social than people in the West, and you observed that e-commerce and other internet businesses were much more social in China than in the US. Can you give us some specific examples?
Yeah, so there are crazy chat boards and message boards on e-commerce in China. So if you look at Amazon or eBay, there is some community on it. But when you go on Alibaba, it's just these crazy. So for example, people who are interested in fishing products, they'll build a community with 10,000 people and chat, and they'll elect a leader to moderate the community. And they'll be in the sort of Taobao, Alibaba website, chatting and sharing things. And so when I look at my groups on Facebook, they're somewhat active. But when I look at my former colleagues on WeChat chatting, it's every day. To me, it's actually too much. It's just posting all the time. But the point is that in a very social culture, the commerce will be that much more social. And so a lot more depends on word of mouth, on referrals, and having sort of key opinion leaders recommend something, because people are listening to their friends and family just as much as an authority.
It seems like a lot of people would like to know why you left Alibaba.
Okay, well, actually for me it's tough, and I thought it was such a great talk right before I got on stage, because I left when the party was still very good, and even when I look at since I left, had I stayed, it would have been an amazing experience. But I just felt personally I had other things I wanted to do. So since then, yeah, I finally got around to starting a family, having a kid. And had I not drawn that barrier between the work and those goals and personal life, then I may never have gotten started on that. So I left to move on. Even though the party was good and it was going to get better, I wanted to focus on other personal goals as well.
And that answers another question, which is, what is your next dream? But I think you've already touched upon that. So you're also a consultant on emerging markets. So what are the branches in the emerging markets that currently have the most potential? So
the interesting thing is, before Alibaba was successful, there was no good case study of an emerging market where e-commerce had taken off. So people assumed it would just follow behind the West, but never sort of overtake it. But China e-commerce has proven that in a market which has a lot of inefficiencies, you can succeed. And once e-commerce takes off, it's even more important to that market than in developed countries. So I would say, looking around the world, the next big sort of battle zone for global e-commerce companies is India. That's a really hot market, a lot of investments going into. Southeast Asia after that. Latin America is starting to pick up. But the very important point for your own business is that this same boom that's happened in China that's allowing Nordic countries to sell into China is going to be also hitting a critical mass in these other emerging markets, and it'll unlock the 6 billion shoppers who were previously really tough to reach before.
Yeah, so building on that, someone asks, is the strategy of Alibaba directly applicable to ventures in emerging markets, or are there other factors to be considered?
So I think what we learned from the eBay Alibaba battle was that eBay's model didn't work in China, just as Alibaba's business model wouldn't really work in the US or in Western Europe. But what I saw after I left Alibaba is that there was a turning point where people stopped studying Amazon and eBay for their market, and then Alibaba became the model that they were chasing, because Alibaba showed how to solve, number one, the trust issue, which in emerging markets was a major barrier for e-commerce. But then all the other issues that Alibaba solved in China were very applicable to India and Southeast Asia.
And regarding Europe, so when do you expect big techs like Alibaba to move into Europe at a significant scale? And what opportunities would that bring?
So, I think the big company will come to Europe is Amazon. I think that is a big challenge, even though I said people shouldn't be afraid of it. It is a huge challenge. But I think what people should see with Alibaba, and I have no affiliation with the company, so I'm not trying to sell them, is actually this has unlocked this potential. I don't think Alibaba is going to come and try and go head-to-head with European companies, but what they are doing is going to Europe and saying, we've got these people buying insane amounts of products on our websites, and so companies in Europe should be selling into China, and Alibaba is trying to make it as easy as possible, just even to overcome some of the trade issues, to prove to Europe that, hey, we're here to help you and not to hurt you.
Well, there's no doubt everyone will be following this closely over the next few years, and so will you. It has been extremely interesting to listen to you. Thank you so much for being here today. Porter Erisman, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you.